Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Building Resilience Index webinar. Please note that you should be muted on entry and that we won't be taking questions through audio. So please make sure that to mute your audio and turn off your video. Welcome to the I4C's first session of the Webinars for Climate Innovation series. And thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I would like to inform everyone to make sure their microphone is muted. We will not be taking questions through audio. Please use the chat box to ask questions or use Slido, the new tool we're using for participating in live poll and Q&A. You can either scan the QR code with your phone or visit slido.com and use the code #I4C2020. You will be able to submit questions through Slido and we will answer them after the presentation. You can even upvote your favorite ones. This webinar is being recorded and recording will be available on the website shortly. And if you are sharing on social media, please use the hashtags #InnovateForClimate, IFC Climate, and #BuildingResilience. We would appreciate if attendees do not turn on the video. And let us begin by introducing a little poll and get to know a little bit from you. So if you could use slido.com. We'll give you a few seconds. Well, given the time, it's not surprising that many are from the US, but great to see colleagues from all over the world. Thank you for joining us today. So which sector are you joining us from? Ooh, and I see on the chat a few more answers to the question where you're coming from, where you're listening from. And I see Serbia, Romania, Peru, Brazil, Ghana. Very cool. Thank you all for joining us. Again, not surprised, most of us are from international development and IFC, but good to see from other industries and sectors. I see building consultancy, climate finance through the chat. So let us tell you a little bit about Innovate for Climate in case you don't know us. We are the global platform to promote dialogue among the public and private sector on innovative ways to mobilize finance towards climate action. We have traditionally hosted an in-person conference in Barcelona, Frankfurt, and Singapore, and we were due to come back to Barcelona this year, but we canceled and we're pivoting to a virtual program offering. So please be sure to check out our website, innovate4climate.com, to see all the content, the blogs, the future webinars. We keep our pillars on finance, markets, policy, and technology. So all the content will be related to that, so stay tuned and look at our website. Again, if a little bit of housekeeping, if you don't hear anything, perhaps your audio is not connected, please connect and keep audio muted. So today we had Rosemary Music and Omid Saveri, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. and let the webinar get started.
Thank you so much, Isabel. I'll start first. This is Rusmir. I am the business development lead for our EDGE Green Buildings program, of which building resilience is a complement now. And I'll let Omid introduce himself and I'll start our presentation.
Thank you, Isabel and Rusmir. This is Omid Saveri. I'm Senior Industry Specialist for Green Buildings on the Climate Business Department at IFC.
We are both very, very excited to be presenting with I4C. Like the organizers, we are bummed that we were not able to do this in person, but perhaps this gives us an even bigger reach. So today is the launch of our program. We'd be happy to follow up with some more one-on-one workshops with any of you. So we'll show you how to be in touch with us and how to connect. Before we start, I'll introduce IFC quickly. IFC is a member of the World Bank Group, and we are focused on solutions for private sector development. And part of our mission is to create markets that support climate business. IFC created our Green Building Market Transformation Program to take a leadership role in encouraging a new paradigm where financial institutions, governments, the property sectors, and consumers all come together to benefit financially through the mainstreaming of green and resilient buildings. We're very, very excited to be adding resilience to our existing green building interventions. IFC's approach addresses the gap in the market for international standards by offering a free software solution to help identify the most cost-effective solutions to design and build green and resilient buildings. Our four-part strategy is focused on working with banks, investing directly into the building sector, advising governments on building codes and incentives, and the EDGE certification program so far. The Building Resilience Index is now complementing this current work. Why is this work so important to us? Natural disasters are on the rise, many of them resulting from global warming and extremes in weather. As a result, the World Economic Forum's most recent list of global risks identified climate as the cause of all of the top 5 economic risks globally. These natural disasters are taking place in an increasingly urbanized world, where the share of population living in urban areas is expected to rise, particularly in rapidly developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The combination of increased disasters and increased urbanization leads to images of destruction. For example, this flooding in the Philippines, or this devastating earthquake in Turkey. Disasters can be incredibly costly. IFC partnered with Georgetown University to research case studies of most common disasters to understand costs per meter square of built property. We found that most common disasters, such as floods, earthquakes, and cyclones, can cost between $325 and up to $900 per meter square of real estate. We have many, many more case studies of this work, which we can release to you for your usage. However, all of these costs can be avoided. Investment in resilience today means avoided costs in property and avoided costs in lives lost tomorrow. If the cost of damages are so great, why has resilience not been built into building design and construction already? Well, there are many obstacles. First, there's a lack of data to show the frequency of disasters or the cost of damages. Developers are too focused perhaps on perceptions of high incremental costs or resilient construction without focusing enough on the benefits. Similarly, buyers do not have data to be informed and are more focused on immediate costs rather than on future disasters, as there are no financial mechanisms to assist them and there are no pressures from insurance. Banks are generally not focused on resiliency and have not yet conducted internal stress testing to understand how much of their portfolio is exposed to disasters. Governments may pass building codes focused on resilience, but likely are not able to enforce them, particularly in emerging markets. All these factors lead to bureaucracy without an easy-to-understand connection between developers, investors, governments, and end buyers. That is why IFC launched the Building Resilience Index. It is a free tool that can be accessed from our website, if somebody just needs to mute, at resilienceindex.org. We are incredibly pleased that we are collaborating with the Innovate for Climate platform. Sorry. Somebody is finding the unmute button. Okay, I think we sorted it out. We are incredibly pleased that we're collaborating with the Innovate for Climate platform to bring this pilot phase of the index to life. We're actively seeking feedback on the pilot framework and tool from investors, governments, NGOs, and technical experts in this space through continued feedback and active participation in an advisory group. Let me quickly introduce the tool. The Building Resilience Index is a risk assessment tool for the real estate industry, which standardizes and quantifies disaster risk, provides guidance to risk mitigation, and creates a disclosure system on adaptation and resilience to relevant stakeholders, including investors, governments, and end buyers. We'll take a look at the tool in action, first in a video, and then my colleague Omid, who is the creator of the tool, will give you a demo of the app. The sound quality of the video on WebEx may not be the best, but we thought it was important for you to see a demo of how different users may be utilizing the app, including the next frontiers for the app development.
Joshua, a construction developer of a housing project called Makati Villas, is at the construction site for the first time. The site is in Manila, Philippines. Here, typhoons sweep through regularly each year, causing damage from high winds and flooding. The city is an earthquake zone and home to numerous volcanoes that could erupt at any time. He opens the Building Resilience Index app to help him understand hazards and vulnerabilities associated with this specific site. His location is identified automatically and he is shown the associated disaster risks. He selects the option for Resilience Report to address the hazard mitigation and climate adaptation to improve the building. He needs to use this as part of his construction loan application. Here, he can see a layered risk map and the details of each disaster risk. He then starts to complete the mitigation questionnaire for the building risks identified to show his company has made the building resilient against natural disasters of Manila. Joshua can also refer to the IFC's user guide on mitigation strategies. The resilience status and score are then updated based on the input he has provided. He generates the standardized letter grade of resilience status. His construction project submits it to the Philippines Commercial Bank for a construction loan. The woman who manages such construction loan applications is Teresa Santos. She's in charge of real estate investments at the Philippines Commercial Bank. Teresa needs to know how much of her bank's real estate portfolio is exposed to natural disasters. She has partnered with the IFC to utilize the Building Resilience Index for this analysis. She and her team work with real estate developer clients and report each project resilience by the Building Resilience Index app. Teresa reviews the reports generated by her clients who use the BRI app, with each report assigned a standardized letter grade. This helps her understand which strategies were employed at design and construction stages to mitigate local disaster risks. Teresa learns that of her $1 billion real estate portfolio, 40% of the building assets by value have a letter grade of A. 30% of her portfolio by value has a letter grade of B, 20% of C, and 10% have a rating of R, which is the highest risk. Teresa can now start making portfolio decisions that would better prepare her in the event of another disaster. A few months later, the Makati villa is done and has a prospective buyer. Clark recently moved to Manila from Cebu for his new job opportunity. He's by himself for a few days while he finalizes a place for him and his family to live. He finds a place he likes, but he wants to understand the potential risk associated with the property. He quickly turns to the Building Resilience Index app and provides the location details. He notices that the recent flooding in the area was not included, so he adds this risk. Then, risk modelers and mitigation strategists behind the app can account for this risk as they work on improving the results for future purposes. He can see that the property has a good risk rating and score, which puts him at ease since the property is resilient in the face of disasters. He decides to put an offer in to buy the apartment. A few months later, he and his family are safely living in the Makati villa without fear of disasters that may come their way. The Building Resilience Index was the common language connecting the investor, developer, and the end buyer of the real estate.
We are very thankful to our colleagues in the Technology and Innovation Lab at the World Bank who produced this video. I will now turn over presentation rights to Omid, who will actually walk us through the software. Or I may need Isabel to help me with that.
Done.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you, Isabel. Yes, as Rosemary said, I want to thank everyone that so far collaborated in production of this work so far. We have been collaborating with the World Bank colleagues, with IFC colleagues, within the Climate Business Department, but also within our colleagues in Philippines, in Thailand, and across the world. So this is a co-production of many of us around the world. So to get to the app, I wanted to quickly give you one element before getting to the app, and that's around how the scoring works. So for all of us to see the scoring, before you saw in the video that there are different scoring for that a building developer can score based on what actions they have taken on their projects. I will explain what this scoring means, and then I'll show you the application. The highest scoring that one can achieve is A+. A+ means that the project has more than 100% score in terms of the resilience conditions, and I will explain how one gets more than 100%. The 100% means that there is no risk, at least there is no known risk identified, or all the risks that are identified are mitigated in the project. So that's 100% mitigation of the known risk in the project. It doesn't mean that the project will not collapse or nothing will happen, but it means that to the best of the knowledge of the developer, all the risks are identified and all the risks are mitigated. B means that not all the risks are mitigated. There are probably around 25% of risks are still left in the project. And to I give this recognition to one of our colleagues, Aris, that mentions that even if the weakest links is the problem, so even if you have 1% risk left in your project, your building may collapse because of that 1% risk. So we encourage all the projects to get to the A level, basically. C means that there are around between 50 to 75% of the risks are identified and mitigated, and there are more leftovers of risks in the project. And R means that less than 50% of the risks are mitigated. and R means the project is highly exposed to the risk. So with this letter grade, we probably would have much easier understanding of how a property being, built and what is the quality of property in terms of risk mitigation. So going to the application itself and explaining how the application works. For us, this is a early version of the application. We are working, as Rosmi said, with the World Bank Technology and Innovation Lab, and also we are working with the CIT team to expand this application, but this is an early draft version of the application just to show how the system works and what is the idea here. Let's assume that we are going to look at a hospital project in Bali, in Indonesia. Given the current lockdown, everyone loves to be in Bali, so why not we try to build a hospital in Bali. To build this hospital, we are starting to fill the app. First, we put the project name. Then we can say who is the developer, Indonesia Healthcare Developers. Why this is important? Because the liability of disclosure of information stays with the developer, and it doesn't stay with us. So this is a disclosure system, not a rating system or not a certification system. And I want to make sure that we all know that there's a difference between a certification system and a disclosure system, and this is a disclosure system rather than a certification system. Then one needs to select what is the building type, and these are the types of the buildings that one can select from. So this is a hospital. And then the user needs to say why they are filling this form. So one can apply for a loan. As you saw in the video, you can go to the bank, and the banker can ask you that in order for you to achieve the construction loan, you have to bring your disclosure on resilience. Or you can use this for insurance applications or for research or for self-review. So let's assume that this is for a loan application. I assume that this project costs $80 million and it has 7,000 square meters of the size. We also need to select the location. So here I go to Bali, Indonesia. And let's select a location in Bali. This picks up the address, and then you don't need to do anything else on the map. So this is for pinpointing the address on the map. The next step is for us to identify what is the likelihood of these risks happening at this site. To do this, the way to do for now, we are using the Think Hazard. Think Hazard is a World Bank product, which is a hidden gem actually. It's an open application and everyone can access it. So we can search the location, and by searching the location, it gives you the likelihood of different risks. For example, for this location, there is a high risk of urban floods. There's coastal flood as high risk. There's tsunami, volcano, cyclone, wildfire, and other risks. So based on these risk rating, you can transfer that data to the resilience. We are working on an API to be able to transfer that data automatically to the system, but for now it's a manual transfer. So let's assume, for the sake of assumption here, we look at urban floods, and we can look at the cyclone, and let's look at the, say, earthquake as well. These three elements, we will look at these three elements. Then the next question would be looking at what is the level of the impact on this hospital in case the cyclone happens. And the idea is that if you have not done protection against cyclone, what would be the likelihood of problems on your project? And depending on the level of cyclone, you can say, okay, my hospital can be out of loss without life loss. So these are the levels. You start from no impact all the way to life of assets with life loss. These are the different levels. So let's say this will make my asset out of function. The next level is urban flood. Let's look at urban flood. In urban flood, let's say that if this happens, my site would be impacted and I would have minor repairable damages. And if earthquake happens, then I would have assets out of function if I don't do proper preparation or proper design on this. Then the next step for me is to look at, okay, for the cyclone, is there a local standard relevant to cyclone protection? I would say yes. For urban floods, there's no local standard, but there's an international standard that I'm going to follow. For earthquake, there is a local standard, and I don't need to follow international standards. So I need to say what is the standard name. So let's say ISO 14 for the sake of this exercise, ISO 15, and here is ISO 16. So one needs to exactly refer what is the standard that they are going to follow. The next step would be to say, okay, is this risk mitigated at the design? I would say yes. And is this mitigated at the construction? Yes. I have to then provide documentation of how I have designed this and how I constructed this. I will show you how this data will be achieved using our user guide that is still under development as well. And then one needs to say who has designed the project for this specific risk. So for a cyclone, it will be a structural designer, and then you need to say who is the designer. So let's say X, Y, Z. And this is important again for that because this person would be the responsible party for this specific risk. So now that we fixed this, we still have our resilience score as 43%, and the resilience status is still R. So we still need to do more work. Let's work on this element. We say, okay, this has been done, and this has been done, and this would be, again, the structural engineer. Now our score got to 86%, and our resilience status is B. So we have more than 75% of the risk mitigated. But because of the weakest link, our building is still at risk. So let's look at the urban flood and mitigate this. And this would be the civil engineer. So civil engineer needs to review the urban flood risk based on the risk maps. They need to design this and report how they have designed and mitigated this element. Now that we've mitigated all the three risks, our score gets to A level. And the question is that how can I get to A plus now? The A plus condition comes at the bottom here. If this project is also green building certified, let's say green ship certified or EDGE certified or LEED certified, we can say yes, this project is being certified by EDGE. And also, would I have the storage of the battery storage? I can say, no, I don't have battery storage, but I have some solar panels on this so that in case the power goes down, I still have some energy on my project. So I would say 10 kilowatts of solar power is here. With this, my score gets to A plus, and this means that my project has the highest level of risk mitigation. For the ones that I have scored 0, I have to explain why there's no such a risk. So it's important always, if I'm not selecting an element, to explain why there's no risk in that location. So let's look at the user guide and see what we are getting in the user guide for as a complement to the application. For those of you that have seen Edge, in Edge we have an application and a user guide that complement each other. And user guide is used to provide more technical details of the application. This user guide is still under development, and we welcome everyone that wants to contribute to review and give us feedback about the user guide. So the user guide, the idea of the user guide is that we would have explanation of each of these elements and explaining what are the ways to mitigate each of these elements. Let's look at the urban flood, for example. So the urban flood would be started by a definition. How do we define the urban flood? Then we will explain what are the metrics, and obviously we are also referring to think hazard as one of our sources for the data. And we explained how the depth of the water and the frequency of the risks can provide link to the likelihood of the risk in the location. We also talk about what are the impacts of these floods in different conditions, depending on the level of impact. Then we talk about the maps. What are the international and local maps available for flooding? So one can access these maps. If they don't want to use think hazard, there are other sources of maps for the data. Then we talk about the different standards, international standards. One of the international standards that we refer to is the FM Global standards, and these are very good data sheets on how to protect the property against flooding, for example. And we like to provide this to the engineers and developers that they want to develop projects, and also some national standards. And then finally, we talk about recommendations and mitigation checklists. So what are the mitigation processes for the designers to follow? And we start from what are the standards. We explain about the design and location, what are the design elements that the designers of the projects should take care of. And this is very important because a lot of the standards that we have seen, we have done reviews in Philippines, talking to the designers. And unfortunately, the definition of the risks and definition of the mitigation measures is different from one firm to another firm and to another firm. Each of them, they have their own ways of defining these elements. And there's a lot of gaps. For example, when you talk to some of the designers, their view of risks is that, okay, I'm resilient because I have shading in my building and my building will not be overheated in summer. The other would say, I have very good seismic design and my structural engineer has designed my project very well, so I'm resilient. And the other one would say, I have very good fire protection and I'm resilient. And that's why the problem in the current market is that there's so many definitions and everyone talks about it with their own angle. And the idea here is that we bring a consistent view of resilience and definitions that then can be used across the board, so that to make sure nobody is missing other elements and with their own views, come to definitions of green buildings. Resilient buildings. And then we talk about the construction, how that construction needs to be done, and then what are the elements one needs to be looking at the operation of the projects. So this is, I'll go back to the slides. So the application basically looks at the three elements, as Rosemary mentioned, the identification of the risks, mitigation of the risks, and disclosure of the risk. So with having these three elements will ensure that everyone has the same way of identifying the risks. So there's no, personal judgments on identification of the risks. Everyone following the same process for mitigating the risk, and The idea on mitigation is that we will continue to collect feedback and to learn more. We are at the learning mode right now to learn what are the best international and national solutions for mitigation of the risks and bring this to the developers as best practices. And then what is the disclosure process is to ensure that the banker, the developer, and the buyer would have exactly the same data when it comes to the information on resilience. And there is no blindsided elements that are missing from the understanding of any of these areas, these three buyers. But also the other part would be the governments. When the disclosure is there, government would have much better condition of understanding what's happening as a city governor, what's happening in the specific city, or as a national government, what are the exposure to the national level risks. So let's understand what are the benefiting parties along the value chain, starting from the financial institutions. The financial institutions are the ones that we feel are the key to our developments, because if the financial institutions put their money in a risky properties, they are the ones that they will be being in loss, but also they are the main drivers that they can push the projects and developers to build better buildings. So for financial institutions, this would be a decreased exposure of the risk. As you saw in the video, it also helps them to have a standard and number-based risk models. They can also understand the accountability in the project developments, because it's important to make sure that there is a clear line of accountability to the risks, and also the disclosure of the bankers to their investors. So if a banker, the same way that we have the green bonds principles, that the banks, they put their green projects in a green bond and then disclose that green bond, the same way there can be investments of the banks in adaptation. The next element would be governments. Governments obviously would, they always encourage resilience construction, but the issue with the resilience construction by governments is that they always have limited capacity to enforce resilience. There is always limited capacity in the permit departments to review the projects. There's always limited capacity in permitting departments to go and inspect the projects. But this will help governments to have better standards of resilience across the board. Having cross-industry and best practices globally, that also helps the clients, the governments with less issues on regulations, and transparency and accountability obviously would benefit the governments. For the construction developers, the current condition is that there's no visibility on who is building better. And that's really harms the ones that are building better, and the ones that are not building better, they may sell their properties at the same rate, or they may be hidden because nobody knows which properties are being built to high standards. So this will bring transparency to construction developers, but also it helps them to improve. The element with construction developers is that they may also not be aware that their designers are missing elements on the quality of their construction. So this also will benefit the construction developers to understand what is the cost of resilience, how much they need to invest extra to become resilient, and what are the elements that they are missing to go higher on the resilience value chain. But also it will help them to have better dialogue with their insurance providers and say, we are providing better construction, we need lower insurance cover rate. Finally, the individual users, the buyers, would benefit from having a better understanding of what is their exposure to climate events. As you saw in the video, when the person goes to buy a house, they would understand what is the risks in this house. And that will give them a better way of deciding whether they would decide to buy a risky house or not to buy a risky house. And then with this, we are hoping that the demand side also start to push the developers and banks to follow. This follows the same principles that are being used in Europe by rating the buildings for energy efficiency, the energy labels, that starts pushing the market that G-rated or low-rated buildings or on appliances. They are starting to go out of the market, and more high-rated appliances or buildings are being sold or used in the marketplace, and that becomes the users or demand side pressure. What are we looking in future? This project is still at the very early stage. We want, through this webinar, to invite all of you to start helping us and work together the same way that on EDGE we have been working with our global experts. We want to bring advisors to the program to help us to improve this program. We look at the crowdsourcing functionality. This is a functionality that would help us to understand the risks on very, very detailed scale. Our view is that the scale needs to reach out to each house around the world or each building around the world. That is a massive undertaking. This may take 10 years, 5 years to be developed, but that's the idea behind this. We're also looking at the geographic-based data, basically, again, with very high resolution of the data. I think Hazard has good resolution, but we like to go further down and become more high-resolution data on risks. This data is available in different locations, but the idea is that bringing this data together and enriching the risk data globally. And the mobile-first application, as you saw, the idea is that the application would be a mobile application so that a user in every location can access it, and with all functionalities from a normal user to a very sophisticated user, if that's sitting in a bank or in a government as a government user. And then the user guide that will be developed further to have more information on all of the categories that I mentioned. We encourage you to check our website, but also the feedback address would be at bri@ifc.org. This is a dedicated email within IFC to get the feedback from different users or experts around the world. If you are within the World Bank or IFC, also this would be a good tool to start using it in our own investment projects or in the projects that we are working with governments around the world for hospitals, for schools, for social housing, for different types of the projects. We like to test this project, pilot it, and learn from these pilots to see how the tool is benefiting the project, or if there is any bottlenecks, if there is any mistakes in the tool, we are happy to listen and solve it to make it better for the users. I stop here, and we can open the floor for the questions and answers.
Omid, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, this is Nyan, and I would like to ask about, when we choose like the user thing hazards to choose which which kind of hazards are applicable for the building. Then I feel like this is very like subjective, right? We will not choose all, but it's us to decide which one to be applied to the building, and it will affect a lot on the score, right? So is there any way, to exactly choose all of the hazards that applicable to the building?
Thank you. Thank you, Neon, for the question. The idea, when I displayed this, I only selected 3, but one needs to select everything that being identified within the think hazard, and then choose the applicability. Obviously, there's a level of subjectivity, you're right, and that's where one needs to either select the right level based on the location, and that's the exact issue, that we need to understand what would be the exact location, and then identifying that risk based on the location. And that's where we like to work on the mapping as well as automating that selection, so that it would not be a user selection, it would be an automated selection based on the risk map as well as based on the type of the building. So then the application itself will select the elements for you, and you are the one that are choosing your mitigation measures rather than the risks.
Omid,
Thank you.
I can add a little bit more. I think, the version that you saw Omid presenting is really the pilot phase of the software. The version that is in our dreams is the one that you saw in the video. There's been a lot of questions I've been monitoring about the video. We will definitely have it be posted soon, either on the Building Resilience website or Innovate for Climate, or both. So the idea where we want the app to go next is the idea of the pre-selected, you select your location, all of the data loads for you, and then all you have to do is think about the impact and how you mitigated that impact. So that's sort of the next phase of the work for us. This is truly just a pilot work. But absolutely, the video will be available. Omid, I'll help Isabel, and we can talk about this idea of the resilience index really as you clarified, but let's clarify it again, as a certification or not a certification. I think that would be important to talk about the mindset around ability to certify for resilience, or not able to certify for resilience, rather, in the way that we certify for green buildings.
Sure. Let me explain that, because that's a very critical point, and I see some of the questions coming in relation to that. So the idea is that it's very important on this tool that the liability of disclosure stays with the engineers and developers that are developing the project. So the liability cannot be taken by IFC or by World Bank Group. To keep the liability on that side, but at the same time have a way of quality control, we are looking at different solutions, and this is still up for discussion. One would be for us to say, okay, there would be a disclosure, and there would be a second party or third party that reviewing the project, but they are not going to certify the project, but they are giving a second review of the project. And they will be putting their names to the review. We had the same system in some of the countries. For example, there are 2 structural engineers. One structural engineer designs the structure, and the second structural engineer reviews and gives the okay. So there are 2 people looking at the same design, and they confirm that this design is sound from a structural point of view. That can happen for each of those disciplines, because remember that here we would have different disciplines. We may have architecture, we may have civil designer, civil engineer, and structural engineer that they will need to be reviewed, each of them in their own disciplines. And some of these disciplines are highly technical, so it's not easy for an external party to review it unless it's a structural engineer needs to be reviewed by a structural engineer. So there would be no no certification, but we can come up with a solution for quality control and review. So there's a question about existing buildings. This tool can be used for existing buildings and new buildings, and that's really our view that the best solution would be that one day you can have a map of a city that has every single building being rated through the system, right? And when you look at the map of the city, you can identify that these are the risky elements to flood. These are the risky elements to to tsunami. So you can easily identify what are the risky parts of the town, and maybe then we can define financial solutions to support those risk-prone areas to improve their building quality, right? So that would be a fabulous endpoint to see that the mayor of the city can say, okay, in my city, this neighborhood has this risk exposure, and I need financial support to improve this area and make it and improve the quality. We explained about the building and city professionals in the work. Obviously, they can become the second reviewers and kind of be the quality control system.
And I can answer, I think.
Yes, please.
I can answer the question, I think, on the link between UNFCCC Climate Resilience, or NDCs. As we mentioned, this is really just a pilot launch or pilot phase of the work. All of this can be absolutely incorporated into the government work and others. What we are looking for is partners to help us present the case to the relevant authorities, and then to educate about how the tool can be utilized. So please do reach out. I think our next phase is now awareness, making sure that the tool has enough projects that show this as a viable option, so we can fine-tune it and then launch it, especially with the geotagging capability. I think that's going to be the really, really important part. So again, this is an invitation for collaboration for everybody to make sure that the tool is addressing your needs, and then to help us educate any of your stakeholders into how to move it forward. Back to you, Amit. I think you had one other question.
Sure. There's a question about. There was one question about the think hazard and future prediction of the future risks. At this point, I think think hazard is not looking at the future risks, but there are definitions and processes to look at the future risks in think hazard. But our view is that we like to build that functionality in future. That once we'd like to use machine learning and AI to understand the previous risk patterns, but also then using the climate change scenarios to predict the future conditions for each location. That is, again, another piece of the work that we like to be to include in this program. But for now, we want to start with the historical data, and then in future we move to future predictions. There's a question for if there's a new credential for this certification. As of now, we do not have new credential, but this is something that we like to explore in future and see how can we engage the engineers and architects, engineers, and other professionals around the world to understand the system better and to provide better quality service to their clients. And this is not unlikely to happen, but we don't know how at this point of time we can engage the professionals. But we are open to suggestions on that. And there was a question about when the user guide will be available for the users. The user guide is still not published. We are doing another review of the user guide. what we are hoping to publish this for the public within next 3 to 4 months on the website. So the website, similar to Edge, would have the published user guides there. The question on if the project will be verified by an assessor like for Edge, this is, as I explained, we are looking at having a third-party review, but not as an assessor. So it would be a third-party review, but not as an Edge expert or assessor that has review requirements.
And I can answer maybe the crowdsourcing information.
Please.
I think that, our goal is to work. We invited a lot of folks from kind of the artificial intelligence world and machine learning world, because the vision is to include a lot more crowdsourcing information. You saw in the video that the tool sort of auto-populates some info, but then even allows users to enter additional information as well. So that it becomes crowdsourcing not even from databases, but even from user inputs. So again, if you are somebody working in the machine learning, artificial intelligence industry, we would very much like to collaborate with you and almost sort of skip the, into the next stage and make the software as usable as possible.
Well, Rosemary and Amit, we're really well on time, and we're not seeing a lot of new questions. So if you're ready to wrap up.
Sure, I can.
Sure.
I can start and then let Omid, who is the real creator of this, maybe end on the last note. So again, from my end, this is an invitation for collaboration. We consider the current version of the tool to really be a pilot phase, sort of a think piece for you. Please email us. You saw the email is bri@ifc.org. We will follow up through the Innovate for Climate platform with the PDF of the information. The website is available. You can go and start playing with it right now at resilienceindex.org. So, consider this as a very much an open invite. We want to get to the stage of the video as soon as we can, working with all of you. But we need your input. This was a tool that we had worked on, but it needs real users. It needs financial institutions. It needs developers. It needs governments to give us that feedback and make it real and not just something that that exists on the pages. Omid, turning over to you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Yes, you're right. We are at the early days. We like to invite your feedback and your collaboration. If there are, you can always reach out to us at bri@ifc.org. Please provide your feedback. Let's continue this dialogue, and hopefully we can all together, improve the resilience of our communities. Thank you so much, everyone.
Well, and with this, we end our first webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Rosemary. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Please check our website for upcoming webinars or our LinkedIn page. And we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you again. Bye.